In today's video, I'm excited to show you how I made this Memorial Day inspired candle based on the American flag. It even has these super cute little stars on top. I'm really excited about the way this turned out. There's definitely some room for improvement, and it didn't quite come out the way I had it pictured in my head, but it's pretty close. So I'm excited to show you how I made this happen. Grab all your stuff and let's get crafty.
This is Mary. Welcome to the IHC Craft Room. For materials, we'll begin with some container soy wax, Stabilo 16 wicks, my faves, Wick Stickums, some hot apple pie fragrance oil, because what's more American than hot apple pie? Red and blue liquid dye, and of course, our beautiful 15-ounce Lux jar. For tools, we're going to need some parchment paper, paper towels, 3 glass measuring cups, a kitchen scale, a pot holder, a star silicone mold, a temperature gun, a heat gun, a 5-ounce measuring cup, a couple of dowels and some clothespins, 3 wood stir sticks, a red marker, a wick cutting tool, and a pair of rubber gloves. I'm going to start out by measuring out the full amount of wax that we're going to need for this candle. This is by far the most complicated candle I've ever made, and the candle maker math was not spot on this time, but close enough to do the job. Let's take a few seconds to review it quickly. This is a 15-ounce Lux jar, and I'm targeting a wax fill of 10 ounces so that we have room for the stars to go on top. But because I don't know how much wax I'll need for the stars, or if I'm going to be making any mistakes, I need a little bit more wax, I'm actually going to target a total volume of 15 ounces of melted wax and fragrance oil. To achieve that, I'm going to need 405 grams of wax and 45 mils of fragrance oil. And if you don't know this about me yet, it has to be 405 grams of wax exactly on the nose, or I won't be able to sleep at night. Usually at this point, I'd be popping the wax into my double boiler, but for this candle, we're going to be melting the wax in the microwave instead. Now, I've never done that before, so yet another first. Since I have a tendency to be Captain Clumsy at the worst possible time, I'm going to cover my skin with some parchment paper and paper towel just in case I spill my fragrance oil while I'm measuring it, which is the same reason why I'm wearing rubber gloves, of course. Let's focus on getting our vessel prepped with our wicks. In the past, when I've worked on a 15-ounce candle, I've cut out a template to help me line up my wicks. But this time I decided to fly by the seat of my pants and mark the dots without a template. Scandalous, isn't it? I'm going to wipe down the bottoms of these wicks just to make sure there's no dust or debris that'll interfere with it adhering to the wick stickum. And then I'm going to make sure that each of these wicks is really firmly attached to the wick stickum before I secure the wicks down to my vessel, using the red dots as a guide on where to place them. I always make quite a production of making sure my wicks are really, really firmly attached to the base of my vessel. Have you ever experienced a floating wick? Well, so far I haven't. And let me tell you, today is not the day. Okay? Okay. To keep the wick centered, I'm going to be using these dowels and clothespins as I've done in the past. So I'm just doing a quick little dry run here before I get started on melting the wax. Since we're going to be melting this wax in a microwave today, let's head on over there and get started. On the bag of wax, it recommends that you melt it in 30-second bursts. Spoiler alert, the first 2 minutes are super boring, but it doesn't take much longer though to get this wax melted down. It's important to make sure that you stir the wax every time you take it out of the microwave. That way it gets evenly heated throughout and helps the wax melt more quickly, because nobody likes standing in front of their microwave for 7 hours waiting for wax to melt. A couple of things to make note of here. Even though you're only putting it in for 30 seconds at a time, mind the handle because it really does get toasty. The second thing is, even though this wax was completely melted by the 7th or 8th time I put it in the microwave for 30 seconds, the wax was not at the temperature I needed to mix in fragrance oil. So I did put it in the microwave one more time, making it a total of 4.5 minutes in the microwave to get to a completely liquefied wax state at the correct temperature, which in this case was around 170 degrees when I took it out of the microwave the last time. By the time I got the wax over to my work table and checked the temperature, I was at 163 degrees Fahrenheit, which is just about where I wanted to be before I pour in my fragrance oil. So that's the first thing we're going to do, and then I'm going to give it a really good stir before I split this wax between my 2 additional measuring cups. My goal was to pour 150 grams worth of wax into each of the other measuring cups, but I overshot a little bit on both. Little Miss Not So Perfect, that's me. Speaking of not being perfect, to date, I have yet to achieve the candle color I've been shooting for. And for this candle in particular, I was determined to get a very vibrant blue color and a very vibrant red color. So I was pretty heavy-handed with the liquid dye. I ended up adding 10 drops of blue dye and 11 drops of red, and the colors came out fantastic, which tells me that when it comes to liquid candle dye, more is more. More vibrant, more amazing, more all the things. So in the future, I need to add more. Okay, we're ready to start pouring our first layer of red. I'm just going to pour until I get a nice thick line around the entire base of the vessel so that I have a nice layer of red. And then I'm going to make sure that my wicks are as straight as I can make them by using these dowels and a few clothespins and just moving them around until they're as straight as possible. Next, I'm going to pour 6 white stars in this silicone mold. And that's it for now. It's time to let this layer of red wax solidify before we move on to the next layer. It has now been a measly 4 hours since I poured the red wax, which is way too soon to be pouring the white layer on top. This mistake ends up costing me because the final product was not what it could have been, and that train left the station right here. A smaller but still annoying mistake was wiping the spout of this measuring cup on the side of the vessel. Oh, Mary. All that accomplished was causing a drip of wax to slide down the inside of the vessel and solidify, leaving a vertical streak of white that I had to deal with later. On a positive note, 4 hours cure time for these little stars was muy bueno. So, silver linings. It's now been 10 hours since I poured the last layer of wax. And once again, this is a mistake because it is way too soon to be pouring yet another layer of wax on top. You can see that the white wax is actually quite pink. So I already see the color bleeding, but does that stop Lady Impatience from pouring the next layer too soon? No, unfortunately, it doesn't. Mistake number 4 is something you may not have noticed, but I did not check the temperature of my wax after I melted it in the microwave. I just saw it liquid and said, let's pour this recklessly, shall we? And I think it's pretty safe to say I poured it at way too high of a temperature. And that would have, of course, caused the wax underneath it to melt and mix again. That poor little white layer. What did I do to you? Another 12 hours have passed since pouring the red layer, but you guessed it, mistake number 5. That's still not long enough. And let's not forget mistake number 6. You didn't see me measure the temperature of this colorless wax before pouring it, did you? No, that's because I didn't. Once again. Okay, we're on the last layer, and let me ask you something. Do you think that I corrected all of my mistakes and made sure to let the candle cure for longer this time? Well, if you do think that, you're wrong. Once again, I only waited 12 hours before pouring this layer, and that takes us to mistake number 7, followed once again by the fact that I did not measure the temperature of my wax before pouring, which is mistake number 8. This is going super well. Alrighty, we're just shy of 24 hours after pouring our blue layer, and it's time to see how this candle and all of its layers are doing before we add on our stars. Right off the bat, you can see that my colors came out fantastic. That is the number one win I'm taking away from this candle making experience. Because even though everything looks amazing right now, time and gravity are about to play a wicked, wicked game with me that I didn't know we were playing. But we'll get back to that later. For now, let's celebrate how perfect these layers turned out. There's some frosting on the top of the candle, and there are some wet spots and a bit of pulling away from the sides of the vessel. Full disclosure, I wasn't planning on using container soy wax for this candle due to all of the issues I just mentioned. But I ran out of Freedom Soy just before filming, so all of these little aesthetic imperfections were quite honestly expected. When I was planning out this candle in my mind, I didn't realize how thick these stars were going to come out. I also didn't realize that I wouldn't be able to sink the stars partway into the blue layer of wax. For some reason, in my mind, I was going to drop these stars halfway down through the blue layer, and that would have made no sense at all, in case you were wondering, because it would have displaced the blue wax and probably made a huge mess. In reality, what I did was melt a super small amount of blue wax in the top layer, just enough to get some liquid wax across the whole surface before placing the stars on top. That way, when the layer of blue wax solidifies, it'll have basically glued our stars down to the top of the candle for us. So in the future, if I use this star silicone mold again, I'm only going to fill it about halfway in each cavity. I think that would have made a lot more sense and been more aesthetically pleasing than these extra large stars. But on the other hand, go big or go home, you know? Alrighty, it's time to see if this candle can candle. Let's see if these Stabilo 16 wicks can hold their own among the stars. It's time to light her up. It's been 9 days since I added the stars to the top of this candle, and a lot has changed. What hasn't changed is the immense amount of frosting, the wet spots, and the separation points. But as you can see, the perfect layers we once had are a thing of the past, and some serious color bleeding has taken its place. What a total bummer. This comes back to the fact that I did not let the wax cure for long enough between each layer of wax. And on top of that, I poured each layer at too high of a temperature. Or I assume I did because I don't actually know since I didn't measure the temperature before pouring any one of these layers. What I've learned since discovering my perfect layers in a state of complete blurriness is that I should have let them set for at least 24 to 48 hours. And I should have poured the next layer at a much, much cooler temperature than I obviously did. Okay, that's enough dwelling on the things we can't change. Let's light this beauty on fire and see if we get all the way to the edge of our vessel. Pretty much as soon as I lit these wicks, the stars immediately started to melt. And I immediately started to panic that my wicks were not going to handle the additional wax. I cut them a little shorter than I think I should have because I just didn't factor in the additional wax of the stars melting. By the 1 hour mark, you can see that I have reason to be concerned because these wicks are really struggling at this point. It turns out there was nothing to be worried about though, because by the 2.5 hour mark, the stars are fully melted and the wicks have started burning much more efficiently. So overall, I have a functioning scented candle, and that means this experiment was ultimately a success, even if there is quite a lot of room for improvement. Thank you for joining me on this red, white, and blue star-spangled, multi-layer, prematurely poured, hot apple pie soy candle making experiment. Yowza, that's a long sentence. Happy Memorial Day to all of my American viewers. I hope you enjoyed today's tutorial. I'd love to hear from you in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe so that we can continue to get crafty together. Toodaloo!